in 4 people on Earth being a Muslim.
1 in 4 people on Earth are Muslim? What? I didn't even realize that there are that many Muslims on the planet. What? Mind-blowing prophecies by Prophet Muhammad. I definitely love watching videos like this. It's very interesting for me to see when Abrahamic religions actually predict something and it's coming through. Coming true.
There were 2 types of Arabs: city dwellers
and
through. Bedouins are nomads.
Bro,
they travel through the vast
my brain is not
and are
braining right now.
on the move. Even during the golden age of Islam, when Arabs were the richest and most learned people on earth, Bedouins remained in virtually the same state that they had been for thousands of years: poor, uneducated, and cut off from the rest of the world. Yet Muhammad, peace be upon him, foretold that these Arab Bedouins of his region would one day compete with one another in the construction of tall buildings. "Now tell me of the last hour," asked the man. The Prophet replied, "That you see the barefoot, unclothed Bedouins competing in the construction of tall buildings." Today we find in the Arabian Peninsula, the Bedouins who used to be impoverished herders of camels and sheep are now not only competing with one another, but also the entire world to construct the world's tallest buildings.
That's true.
People on earth who literally wore rags become the wealthiest nations on earth.
Oil.
One thing that made this rapid change possible was the discovery of oil. The seemingly empty deserts of the Bedouins had it in abundance. They went from camels to Cadillacs in a single generation.
Yeah, it's mad to me. Freaking hell, dude. Like, before, the Arabian Peninsula is literally just a desert wasteland, and now all of a sudden, boom, boom, they have like so much oil. Although I heard that the Arabian Peninsula only has oil that can last them another 100 years. I could be wrong about that though. I'm not sure how true that is.
The construction of tall buildings among the Arab Bedouins has even reached Mecca, Muhammad's city of birth. The last few decades have seen a massive surge in building construction in Mecca. The famous Mecca Clock Tower is currently the 3rd tallest building in the world. In order for
What? This clock tower is the 3rd tallest in the world. So this is the tallest clock tower in the world. And I love clock towers too. I love clock towers. This is the clock. What? I've seen this building before, but I didn't know where it was from. I didn't know it was in freaking Saudi Arabia. Let alone it was that big. That is absolutely mad to me. For
construction to be possible, many of Mecca's ancient mountains had to be demolished in order to make room for the tall buildings that had sprung up. Amazingly, this is also something that Muhammad had foretold.
How in the world do you demolish mountains, bruh?
The hour will not be established until the mountains are moved from their places.
Oh!
Demolishing entire mountains has only been made possible in the 20th century with the advent of technology such as explosives. It's important to point out that Muhammad himself was a simple man and wanted other Muslims to maintain that simplicity. He did not like Muslims to be extravagant. So, if he wanted to will this prophecy to become true, he would have to encourage the Arabs to build tall buildings. Yet, he never did.
Interesting.
Spread of sexual immorality and disease. Muhammad, peace be upon him, revealed that the Day of Judgment would not take place until sexual immorality had become so prevalent and normalized that it would begin to be carried out even in public places.
Oh.
He said, "The hour will not be established until people fornicate with each other in the road, just as donkeys fornicate." Today we live in a world where we are being constantly bombarded with explicit sexual imagery, be it in TV, film, or advertising. And with the advent of the internet,
Yo, I want to say something, but I don't want to make my channel too controversial. I will say though, because most of my viewers are adults, vast majority are adults, I do find it a bit ridiculous how we live in a world where you can't openly talk about this, but yet it's everywhere around us. I was talking about that with a few people before, a couple of my friends, and I was like, why is it that we can't like openly talk about this stuff? Like, for example, like, I don't know, let's say you just casually saying, "Oh yeah, I'm about to go and I don't know, bang someone or something." I don't know. You know, you get weird looks, man. People will look at you weird if you do that openly public. But if you go and do this type of stuff here, you know, just promote sexual exploit. Like, I don't even know what the heck. Basically, what he's talking about here. Oh no, it's suddenly completely fine. Like, it's weird how like we as a society just can't really like openly talk about that stuff, even though it's kind of normal, really and truly. But yet we do this. It's, bro, when you realize how backward the world is, it really makes you think.
Pornography has now become readily available at any time in any place. In fact, we are finding more and more stories in the news of people being arrested for having sex in public. And an interesting side note is that the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him,
did I hear that correctly? People are what? I've never heard that in the news. I literally just processed that in my brain just now. What in the world? People are doing that in public?
described what will be the consequences of such widespread sexual immorality. He said, "Never does sexual perversion become widespread and publicly known in certain people without them being overtaken by disease that never happened to their ancestors who came before them. The increase of sexual immorality has seen the emergence of previously unheard of diseases such as AIDS, just as the Prophet Muhammad had forewarned."
AIDS, HIV, AIDS. Didn't it come from monkeys? Although it did, it spread via, sexual interactions, but didn't it originate from monkeys or something? Actually, growing up as a kid, I heard that it originated because people were, how do I say this without getting demonetized? People were doing shots in the back in the place where you're not supposed to, it starts with an A, and they were doing canal. Yeah, they were doing canal vex, but remove the C and remove the V and add a S, and yeah, that's what I'm saying, guys. I need to keep this video monetized. I need to make my money, but I don't know. I heard that's how it originated. That because you're not supposed to be doing canal vex. I don't know.
A world steeped in interest. Muhammad, peace be upon him, claimed that the practice of interest would one day become so dominant that even those who try to avoid it will still feel its impact. He said, "A time will come upon mankind when they will consume interest. Whoever does not take from it will be afflicted by its dust." This clearly describes the state of the world economy today. In the modern world, it is almost impossible to avoid dealing with, or at the very least being impacted by, interest. Just think about how many people have interest-bearing bank accounts and buy things using credit cards. Even if one somehow manages to avoid dealing in interest directly, almost every aspect of our lives is impacted by it. Central banks influence the purchasing power of our money, and virtually every country in the world, even those considered to be wealthy, are drowning in interest-based debt. The financial system even suffered a global collapse in 2008, a disaster which had plunged the world into economic turmoil, the consequences of which will be felt for generations to come. What makes this prediction amazing is that the financial state of the world over the last century is unique in history. At the time of Muhammad, finance was based on commodities with intrinsic value, such as gold and silver coins. Gold and silver have been used as the most common form of currency throughout history. The use of paper money with no intrinsic value, along with the massive debt and interest that it has resulted in, is a phenomenon of modern finance.
I wouldn't really say that's a phenomenon of modern finance because I remember when they reacted to the 30 Years War. Well, the 30 Years War is early modern history now that I think about it. But they still weren't using paper money. They were using I forgot what in the world it was called, but they were basically using like some type of fake metal or something to like mint coins, and they were mixing it with real metal, and thus that completely devalue the money in the Holy Roman Empire because like way I forgot what the heck it's called, but like way too many people were minting that with like the fake metal, thus causing a huge inflation problem around the Holy Roman Empire. But I mean, I can still use that as an example because that wasn't really used with paper money. But okay, let's continue.
That could have been easily guessed by Muhammad over 1400 years ago. The defeat of Rome and the conquest of Persia. During the Battle of the Trench, where Muhammad, peace be upon him, and his followers were under siege by their enemies, being outnumbered 3-1 and staring in the face of certain defeat, the Prophet made some bold predictions. He said, "God is most great. I have been given the keys of Syria. By God, I can see its red palaces at the moment. God is most great. I have been given Persia. God is most great. I have been given the keys of Yemen." At that moment, Muhammad had made the astonishing claim that the Muslims would not only take the lands of Yemen and Syria, much of which was under the occupation of the Roman Empire, but that they would also defeat the mighty Persian Empire. Historically, Muhammad's companions saw this prophecy fulfilled before their very eyes, as they went on to defeat the Romans and conquer Persia.
Where Muhammad is the walking definition of I called it.
What are the Muslims who lacked economic and military strength could topple the superpowers of the world in such a short span of time?
Well, I mean, they were so weakened at that point, and then the whole Justinian plague wiping out like 25% of the Eastern Roman Empire's population. Yeah, when the Justinian plague happened, that was basically like the beginning of the end for the Eastern Roman Empire. Had the Justinian plague not come, I'm pretty sure Rome would have lasted way longer, and probably would have even lasted up until depends on when you think is early modern history, but it probably could have lasted, I don't know, maybe even until today, you know. That plague, the plague also affected the Persian Empire as well, who was also weakened by fighting with the Romans as well, eventually just paving the way. Although, you know, this is coming from a Christian perspective, everything happens for a reason. Everything is the will of God. So I could just literally sit here and just say, well, God wanted the plagues to happen. I even said this in my early Muslim expansion series, which I'm still reacting to, that most likely God wanted this plague to happen so that the Muslims could spread it. My personal opinion. So who knows? Maybe that wasn't just a coincidence.
The astonishing way that the Muslims defeated the superpowers captured the world by surprise. As historian Barnaby Rogerson explains, you have to remember that the two great superpowers were the Byzantine Empire, i.e. the Eastern Roman Empire, and Sassanid Persia. They were the dominant superpowers. If you're putting it in a modern parlance, it's a bit like the Eskimos taking on the United States of America and Russia. No rational person would have ever conceived of such a possibility. The sentiment is echoed by historians who cannot explain how Islam became such a dominant force so quickly. Professor of Byzantine Studies Andrew Louth wrote, "The speed with which the eastern provinces of the Byzantine Empire succumbed to the Arabs remains to be explained by historians." Prevalence of writing. Many take for granted the ability to read and write.
That is so true. That is so true. I was literally talking to a friend like a week ago about this. I'm like, yo, throughout most of history, most people did not know how to read and write, and people are literally taking that for granted and do not understand the power of being able to read and write. That is such ability that we really should not be taking for granted, because we have the ability to write anything that we want, to store knowledge wherever we want now, And that was a big deal. And a lot of people just take that for granted. Even now, there's a lot of places where people don't know how to read and write.
Books that are available in the modern age. However, for the people of the past, illiteracy was the norm, and books were very scarce. Muhammad, peace be upon him, was born into a society in which very few people could read or write. It is estimated that the number of people who were literate in his locality of Western Saudi Arabia did not exceed 17. Muhammad himself could not read or write. Against this backdrop, the Prophet Muhammad made the prediction that writing will one day become widespread among mankind. He said, "Ahead of the hour, the pen will prevail." The Arabic word used for pen here is qalam, which also carries the wider meaning of writing. This perfectly describes our world today, in which it is the norm for people to read and write. And there
Interesting.
are of books, newspapers, and magazines. This has only been made possible thanks to 15th century technological advances, such as printing that took place over 800 years after Muhammad's prophecy. And with the advent of the internet, writing is spreading even more. Anybody with a computer or smartphone now has access to millions of books with just the click of a finger. It's quite powerful that Muhammad, who could neither read nor write, prophesied the spread of reading and writing.
Now, this is usually the most common thing that I hear from atheists whenever they hear predictions from the Bible, or in this case from Muhammad. They'll usually say something along the lines of, "Oh well, that's just the human condition," right? They'll be like, "That's just the human condition. Okay, that doesn't mean anything because that's just how humans are," right? They'll be like, "This doesn't make any sense because eventually humans is like." I don't even know what the hell the human condition is. I get the gist of it. Like, oh, that's just basically human nature to like advance and like do other stuff, I guess. But like even like trying to explain it, it just does not make any sense to me how you could just say that's the human condition. Like, oh my gosh, dude. But yeah, for usually that's like their main argument for all of these prophecies, man. It's the human condition, or that's just human nature, or whatever the hell that means. I don't even know, man.
Greening of Arabia's deserts. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, made a bold prediction about the future state of Arabia. He said, "The hour will not begin until the land of the Arabs once again become meadows and rivers." This narration anticipated the greening of Arabia's extensive dry desert environment. As recently as 1986, there was little to no farming in the region. However, over the last 30 years, these deserts have been transformed to grow grains, fruits, and
I
vegetables.
did not know that.
Such as center pivot irrigation. This is a process that pumps water to the surface from deep underground reserves, some of which date back to the last ice age 20,000 years ago.
Oh wow,
Now put yourself in the position of a person
that's
living
insane.
in 17th century Arabia. This region hosts some of the most extensive sand and gravel deserts in the world, with very little rainfall. Could anyone inhabiting such a harsh environment ever rationally conceive of the possibility that one day there would be a plentiful supply of water and abundant crops?
Not
Prophecy
necessarily.
also makes a claim about the ancient past. Note the words of Muhammad, "The lands of the Arabs once again become meadows and rivers." By saying once again, he is implying that at one stage in their history, the deserts were lush with vegetation and life, and that they will be returning to this former state. Geologists now know that the Arabian Peninsula was, indeed, once filled with meadows and rivers in ancient times. Modern archaeological discoveries have uncovered a number of fossils and conclude that once upon a time, the Arabian Peninsula was much greener and wetter, just as Muhammad had revealed.
Same thing with the Sahara Desert. The Sahara Desert, it switches. Right now, it's sub-Sahara, that's green, but I forgot how many years. I think it's gonna switch in like 10,000 years or something. In 10,000 years, or I could be wrong about that, but it's gonna switch again, and then it's gonna be the Sahara, the one that's currently desert right now. The Sahara Desert itself is gonna turn green, and sub-Sahara is gonna turn desert again.
the rapid spread of Islam and the decline of the Muslims. Muhammad, peace be upon him,
Now this is interesting.
predicted that the Islamic civilization would reach both east and west. He said, "God folded the earth for me, and I saw its east and west, and the dominion of my nation will reach as far as the earth was folded for me." History bears witness to the fact that Islam spread rapidly, both east and west,
Yep.
just as Muhammad boldly had foretold. At the time, this was a geographic expansion the likes of which the world had never witnessed. The Islamic Empire was the largest the world had ever seen. The Prophet Muhammad not only informed us about the spectacular rise of the Muslims, he also foretold their decline. He said,
Okay.
"Will call each other and set upon you, just as diners set upon food." Someone then asked, "Will it be because of our small number that day?" The Prophet Muhammad replied, "Rather, on that day you will be many, but you will be like foam, like the foam on the river." Here we can see that Muhammad prophesied the dire circumstances in which the Muslims would find themselves.
I mean, I feel like somebody who doesn't believe in like any religion, they could easily just like look at this, watch this, what he just said, this prophecy right here, and just say, "Oh well, that just makes sense because, when you're too powerful, everyone's gonna team up on you, right?" You gotta think of it like that, right? When you're telling these prophecies and whatnot, you have to think of it from that person's perspective. Like, how do I convince them that this is true, right? How do I do that? If you can't do that, then you're basically talking to nothing.
He explained that a day would come in which the Muslims would be large in number, but in such a state of weakness that other nations would invite one another to set upon them. The analogy of Muslims being that other nations would invite one another to set upon them. The analogy of Muslims being eaten as a meal was given, which emphasizes just how helpless they would become. This prediction accurately describes the radical turn of events that took place in the Muslim world in the 19th and 20th century. Prior to this, the Muslim lands had grown to become some of the most powerful in the world.
Yep.
From the time of the death of Muhammad until the 19th century, the Muslims were economically, politically, militarily, and technologically far ahead of most of the world.
It's crazy how insane it declined too.
Nearly all the Muslim world was occupied, colonized, and militarily defeated by non-Muslim nations. Russia had annexed the Caucasus. France controlled Algeria, Morocco, and Tunisia. Great Britain occupied
The Soviet Union was not Russia. The communist supporters created the Soviet republics and joined the Soviet Union. So that wasn't really Russia. No. But no.
occupied Egypt, Syria, Iraq, Palestine, and India. And the Dutch controlled Malaysia
Syria was a French colony, though,
and Indonesia.
if I'm not mistaken.
Of the 50 Muslim countries that exist today, only a few survived occupation, and the ones that did were still subject to colonial masters.
I mean, I literally talked about this in my literal last reaction that the first caliphate was also a colonial caliphate. I mean, colonial empire as well, although caliphate does translate to empire in English. I guess he's talking about the European style of colonialism, and I had a few people discussing this with me in my comments as well. Guys, even if you think of colonialism as European style of colonialism, each European power had different goals for colonialism, so that's still wrong to think about. The British Empire was an empire built off trade. That's why the Commonwealth still exists. French colonialism was to make any and everything become French. Spanish and Portuguese colonialism was to find gold, really and truly, and eventually it was just more or less to just, mine resources, quite frankly speaking. So, they weren't the same. Each and every colonial empire from the European power, they had different goals and they had different intentions on their colonialism, quite frankly speaking. So for him to say that the Arab colonizers, mind you, they originated from Arabia and they spread throughout foreign lands, they spread throughout indigenous lands that they were not native to. That's literally colonizing. When you get up and you move from one place and you go to another place and you set up a permanent settlement or permanent territory administration, etc., which is basically what the caliphate did. Like, another thing that people kept saying in my comments was, oh, well, it wasn't as brutal as the Europeans. Which, yeah, you could say that. But it's still colonialism regardless. It's still colonialism. Really and truly. Like, it's still colonialism. Like, even then, like, with the Europeans, it's like, the British Empire was arguably, like, the least worst colonial master out of all of them. Quite frankly speaking. Out of all the major ones, I should say. Because Russia is also a colonial empire as well. Well, Russia... it did some messed up stuff too, but it wasn't as bad as. But still, Russia is still also colonial. Even now today, it's still technically a colonial country because most of Russia isn't even like Rus territory. You get what I'm saying? So, you know, it's like you can't just make this black and white. You can't just make the whole colonialism thing black and white. Like you just can't, because then you have to go deeper and deeper and deeper. Then, like, you know, differentiate a whole bunch of things. You know, you just can't make it black and white.
That did were still subject to colonial masters. All of this is just as the Prophet Muhammad had predicted. At the time, there was an estimated 200 million Muslims, representing 12.5% of the world's population.
Wow.
But their considerable numbers could do nothing to prevent the defeat by their rivals. They were weak like the foam on a river. Again, just as Muhammad had foretold. If we reflect on this prediction, it is quite counterintuitive. If this prediction was guesswork, then it would have made more sense to state that the Muslims would be diminished in number and that would be the cause of their weakness. Yet Muhammad predicted the exact opposite, a paradoxical situation of the Muslims being vast in number but very weak. And it came true. Historically speaking, when religions lose their influence on the world stage in such a way, it is usually followed by a stagnation or decline in the number of their followers. Yet Muhammad foretold the exact opposite with regards to the religion of Islam. He
Interesting.
said that it would grow in terms of the number of followers, to the extent that it would eventually enter every household. He said, "This matter will certainly reach every place touched by night and day. God will not leave a house or residence, except that God will cause this religion to enter it."
You know, and it's funny because Christianity is declining hilariously enough, while Islam is actually still increasing. Islam is actually predicted to become the most popular religion in the world. Crazy, by like 2050 or 2030. Is it 2030? Is that a 2050 to somewhere around 2030 to 2050? Yep. Crazy, isn't it?
Witnessing this prophecy unfold before our very eyes.
Yeah.
Islam is currently the fastest growing religion in the world.
Basically what I just said.
Nearly 1 in 4 people on earth being a Muslim.
1 in 4 people on earth are Muslim? What? I didn't even realize that there are that many Muslims on the planet. What?
Forecasted to be the world's largest religion by the year
2070.
This is despite Islam being constantly attacked by the media, the colonization of Muslim lands, and the many wars that have been waged in the Muslim world. Even the name Muhammad has prophetic implications. It's an Arabic word that means the praised one. The Quran states how Muhammad's remembrance will be raised. "We elevated your mention for you." Since this verse was revealed over 1400 years ago, the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, has been the most praised person in history.
Wow.
Today, not a second goes by without a minaret somewhere in the world publicly proclaiming the time for prayer and saying,
أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله.
"I bear witness that Muhammad is the messenger of God."
أشهد أن
Yo, I saw a wild TikTok like a week ago where he put a quote from whatchamacallit, he put a quote of the Bible warning of false prophets, and he put a picture of Prophet Muhammad, and someone in the comment was like, why are you putting a picture of Prophet Muhammad? It's saying that you should be warned of false prophets. And then the dude who made the TikTok replied with the comment, correct. I'm not gonna lie, that was the funniest thing. One of the funniest thing I have seen up to that point. Oh my goodness, dude. Crazy, dude. I'm surprised you didn't get so much backlash from all the Muslims.
محمد رسول الله.
Moreover, the name Muhammad is consistently the most popular name given to newborns across the globe. This is despite the fact that
So
Muhammad
cliche.
encouraged Muslims to adopt his name. In fact, he said that the best names are Abdullah and Abdurrahman.
Abdullah. I like Abdullah too.
Now, we've analyzed a number of the Prophet Muhammad's prophecies, which were made over 1400 years ago, and have seen how he has accurately foretold many things. Purely from the standpoint of basic probability, for someone to accurately guess about such future events, which spanned across multiple nations in different time periods, many of which were outside the sphere of Muslim influence, to give so many predictions without making a single mistake is utterly impossible. Today, millions of people believe in false prophets and follow false systems for guidance in life. As human beings, we're willing to follow false prophets, man-made systems, and baseless superstitions, but why
I hate this the most. You see this eye? I see so much people wearing it. I hate that. It annoys the living hell out of me.
accept the real guidance when it comes from God? God empowered the Prophet Muhammad with accurate prophecies as a way for us to distinguish the true prophets from the false.
Yeah, and people are still stubborn, which is hilarious.
For falsehood is, by its nature, bound to perish. This video is based on the book, The Forbidden Prophecies. To learn more about the evidences for Muhammad's prophethood, please download your free copy of the book at the link below.
Very wonderful reaction suggested to me, for me, by me. Look, man, you made it all the way to the end of the video. Make sure you subscribe if you already haven't, man. Look, if you like my reactions, go and like the video. If you have anything you know I'd like reacting to, man, go and comment it down below for me, okay? This is a suggestion. I don't know if this was the right video, but I had a few Islamic viewers of mine who wanted me to react to this, actually. So, yeah, I definitely am doing it. I'm definitely catching up with all my Islamic reactions that was suggested to me because I was super behind on those. You know, thank you for watching and goodbye.